One. And we're live again. Welcome to one more edition, one more episode of DojoLIVE, connecting experts like you. And, well, this is Carlos, as ever, your host, right here in one of our offices in Mexico. I'm broadcasting from Mexico City. And it's rainy and cloudy today, as usual, here in Mexico City. Nice weather. And today, we're going to be having a great conversation with Alli McKee. She is the CEO and founder of Stick, a communications platform built on B2B sales and success teams to illustrate ideas automatically in real time to have better conversations with their customers. So welcome to the show, Alli. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, Alli. And we look forward to this conversation as well. Okay. Well, Alli, I usually start off these interviews just asking a couple of questions, and we were going to be moving on to the topic. And of course, the questions are, as you might imagine, tell us about you. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about Stick.
Absolutely.
And then we'll continue. Thank you again, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. So my background in the very beginning was in visual arts. So I've always been an artist pretty much my whole life, illustrating ideas, right, and trying to tell stories with those ideas. But I started my career as a management consultant at Bain & Company, making a lot of slides. And seeing how, the visualization of ideas wasn't just powerful for self-expression, but it was actually really powerful for communication as well. And then in business, there's a dollar value attached to that. And I saw that, in a given meeting, like we build, 60, 70, 80 slides for a steering committee meeting for this executive team. And of all those pages, the CEO really only cared about, one, maybe two super simple visuals. And at Bain, we called that the $1 million slide. Right, and it was the simple diagram or chart that captured the essence of the case. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that this was incredibly valuable, and yet people, generally speaking, in business are not great at it because we're econ majors, not art majors. Right? And so I realized, okay, if I've built up this process over the years of visualizing ideas and seeing this format to these stories, then we can take that process and turn it into a program. And so that was the kind of idea behind Stick, is how do we take these best practices from designers, storytellers around the world and build that into software so that anyone can do it.
Okay. So, Alli, regarding Stick, would you say that, let me put it this way, I'm just trying to word my thoughts, so please bear with me. How's your product trying to differentiate itself against other similar products in the market?
Yes, so there are lots of fantastic products out there. It's a very competitive space, which is great for us because it means the bar is really high, right? But the idea is that, other products, they start you off with a blank slide or a blank canvas. Mm-hmm. And we found that for non-artists and non-designers, that's incredibly intimidating. It's hard to know where to even start, right? If you aren't a designer and you have this, blank slide with a million different things that you can do, where do you even begin? And so what we found is most of our customers, they think and they write in bullet points. So that's how they organize their ideas. And so what makes Stick different is that we take your ideas from the format, from the language that you speak, which is bullet points, and we translate those into visuals for you automatically. So, you automatically have a first draft, and it's not going to be totally perfect. Technology isn't quite there yet, but we can give you a pretty good first draft and then make it super easy for you to make edits, swap out different visual structures, different visual icons, etc., so that, we're learning and getting better along the way. Okay.
Well, thank you, Alli. And okay. Now I'd like to move on to today's chosen topic. And you mentioned storytelling in sales.
Yes.
And of course, how storytelling is more important than ever in sales and in business today. And I totally agree with you in more ways than one. But if you care to tell us in our audience how this ties in to, for example, in the case of Stick, with artificial intelligence and machine learning, those more technical aspects of storytelling in sales. So how do we connect these two items, Alli?
So first, I would say, I make the case for why storytelling. I think that storytelling is something that it automatically sounds sort of soft and fluffy, right? And so when you have salespeople who are trying to make a certain quote, they're trying to make their quota, they're trying to hit their number. This whole storytelling can sound like, oh, that's not my job. My job is to sell stuff and sign contracts. And I would argue, to the salespeople out there listening, saying, oh, I'm not a storyteller, I'm a salesperson. I'd say, no, not anymore. Like, your job now is to tell stories. And that's because in the market today, there's more noise than there's ever been. Even if you look at most of our customers are within the MarTech SaaS space. And a few years ago, there were 150 companies in the space. Now there are nearly 7,000. So if you think about just the noise you are getting on a given day, it's incredibly overwhelming. And so story is really the only way to stand out and make your message transferable, right? Because stories are the way that we as human beings sort of process information and transfer that information to other people. If your prospect can't tell, the other big trend I would address is, on average, there used to be 4 to 5 buyers for a given B2B transaction. And now on average, it's up to 6 or 7. So even though the deal values are going down, the number of people involved is going up. So it's becoming more and more complex, and you have to make that message transferable, because if you pitch to someone, they have to then go pitch to their boss. And story is the best way to make that message transferable.
Okay, thank you, Alli. Okay, I was kind of wondering also about the following, especially storytelling is a little bit, from my standpoint, it could be a little bit on the subjective side, because each and every one of us has a different story. So in terms of feeding the right data onto a platform in order to produce outstanding results, how do you tackle the challenge? Well, I think as a non-engineer myself, I would say it's a challenge for me. But how would you tackle the challenge of handling data in a way that does not fall into the subjective part of the equation, so that in order to come up with a seamless or with an outstanding product? Right.
So I would think of it almost as a language, right? Which is that if you take the English language, any language, there's a set of rules that guide that language, right? Which it's like grammar, right? A good sentence has a subject, a verb, and an object. And so you can communicate anything in the structure of that sentence, but if your grammar is incorrect, it's going to sound jarbled and people aren't going to understand what you're saying, right? Story is the same, I would argue. So you have, the beginning, the middle, the ending, and then when you dive into that, you have these different components that are the same across, particularly in sales. You have the problem, the solution, the market trends, the how it works. You have all these components that are consistent across. What you put in those blocks changes, but the blocks are still the same. And so, today's tools don't give you any guidance on what those blocks are, should be, how you're how you're sequencing them, what you're putting in them. And so what we're trying to do is build a little bit of intelligence around that process to say, look, these are the components of a good story. This is the rhythm of a good story. These are the pieces and the sequence that you should follow to improve your story.
Okay, and in the case of B2B is a little different, right? Very different to B2C. So in the case of B2B sales, these are usually, this is the way I see it, these are usually longer term, more of a consultative approach. So how would you say that is the ideal way to keep track of the right storytelling pace? And I think there's a name for that in the industry. And I think, I'm sorry, I can't recall the name right now, but I've seen it in other platforms. And it's just a way that you build your story with the passing of time. So how do you keep track of that in order to make it coherent and thinking, or are you able to think long term in building your story, or giving continuity to the story that you're telling? How do you go about that and make sure that everything falls in place in the longer term?
Right. So I'll back up and sort of challenge that premise that B2B is very different from B2C, because here's what's happening in a lot of, particularly in the technology industry, what's happening is that you're shifting from an enterprise sale, which is, you know, a $3 million contract, a two-year contract, and you get this one big pitch moment with your executive, they sign, and then you're done for 2 years, right? And then you go for renewal. With SaaS, what's happening is that 3-year contract is now a 3-month contract, or it's a 1-month contract, or it's usage-based, right? So you don't have the time or the money to make that long sale anymore, because instead of, you know, being a $3 million deal, it's now a $15,000 deal. And so the volume and the speed of these transactions is increasing and increasing and increasing, such that there is kind of this blended approach really of B2B is not as different as from B2C as it used to be, particularly when you layer all the noise in the market, right? But even with that, I think that in terms of your question on how do you tell stories in the long term without sort of repeating yourself or doing the same thing over and over again, I think that comes down to brand and being really, really clear on what it is you stand for, and making sure that that's consistent throughout. So if you look at, to the point of B2B versus B2C, I mean, look at some of the best consumer brands just tell vastly different stories, but the core is always the same, right? Which is, look at like Nike, just do it, and how many different ways that can show up, right? That can show up in a 10-second spot, that can show up in, an entire sponsored event, like that can show up in so many different ways. And I think that you're going to see the importance of brand rising in B2B far more than it has in the past. And some of the companies on the cutting edge are already doing this. So I think a great example that comes to mind is Drift. It's very hot right now. Drift is all about brand. It's all about marketing. They have put marketing at the top of that company. And as a result, they totally changed the game on B2B sales. It's not a slow sales process. People want to be a part of that movement. There's you're seeing a lot more, buyers are becoming younger and younger, and the sort of millennial generation cares a lot about brand and storytelling and visuals and engagement and video. And so I think that the brands that win are going to be the ones who understand that and understand that, B2B and B2C are not as far away as they seem. Yeah,
does that now that kind of brings me back to the why? Well, you mentioned that storytelling is more important than ever in sales and in business today. Why today? Why not? Why particularly today? Is it more important than ever?
I think it's because of the noise factor. So it's because you've got so much more competition for your buyers' attention, and stories are what stand out and they'll actually stick with you. So storytelling has always been, it's timeless, and it's been a format that we've used certainly in more ways than just sell it, but it is more important in sales today. I think the other component is, as I mentioned, your buyers are getting younger and younger in the sense of, a higher percentage of your typical B2B buyers. These aren't old executives in suits anymore. These are young people who have grown up on Snapchat, have grown up on Instagram, have grown up on Facebook, and for them, storytelling is kind of the currency that it's their communication currency. And so if you're asking them to all of a sudden, you're asking to get their attention when they're using stories in every other part of their life to communicate, and all of a sudden you're asking them to read your black and white bullet point proposal of feature specs, it's pretty obvious of where their attention's going to go. It's not going to be your proposal.
Okay, I got that. Thank you, Alli. Okay, now thinking more in terms of, now I'm going to move on a little bit onto Stick itself. The
Absolutely.
Company, okay, and this is going to fall in more into the inspirational side for those who might be watching out there who want to be entrepreneurs in the tech space. What would you consider, let's say, a leapfrog moment for your company and the markets you serve?
The leapfrog moment in the sense of sort of founding the company, or how do you define leapfrog moment?
Well, to me, a leapfrog moment would be something that sort of what I would call, okay, the aha moment in which I say, this is the need that I need to solve, and this is how I'm going to go about and solving it. This is what I'm going to do to create it, and this is what's going to happen to make it happen.
Right.
Okay, so to speak.
Right.
So, how would you define that?
So, I'll say, when I started, I'd say when you start a company, there's so many different stories out there, right? Of sort of founders, founding teams, how things are built, and you find yourself saying like, oh, I can do that. I'll use that playbook or that playbook, or this is how this is going to happen for me. And the reality is there hasn't really been one leapfrog moment. It's been far messier than I ever thought, frankly. Just like right when you think you've had that leapfrog moment, you fall into another pond, or or when you think you're taking a little step, you're actually taking this huge leap. It's much more. It's not as clean cut as I ever expected. That said, I think I think some of the biggest moments have come from like sharing. Oh man, I mean, in the early days, it's just building product and seeing people be like, oh, I don't really get it. But that first, for us, it was building that first prototype that actually took text and turned it into visuals, and people could see, even though the visuals are creative, they weren't great, but they could just see, whoa, hold on, okay, I finally understand this. And so, I think what that means for other companies out there is that the more you can pull your ideas to like really manifest them into a product is so much more powerful. It's like show don't tell, right? You can talk about your company and the problem all day long, but it's really not until you give them something that you actually start learning just a really accelerated rate.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you, Alli, once again. And I was thinking that I should probably ask you about this, because you're correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that your background is more in business administration, right? So you're more of a business person embarking into the technology space, right? And so in that sense, because you don't have this this engineering background specifically, so I assume that you're building up a team of engineers and you're working with them. So what keeps you up at night in terms of the challenges that facing your industry? It could be anything, it could be from AI, from machine learning, NLP, whatever it is. What keeps you up at night, let's say, in order to make sure that you're going to remain competitive for the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah. It's the blessing and the curse, right? It's just the pace of change. It is just changing so quickly, and it is hard to keep up. And so I think, one of the things that has kept me going on this is just an obsession with learning and constant self-improvement that comes with that. So I love just reading and talking to people and understanding, not being afraid of the things that I don't understand, and instead trying to dive in as much as possible. And that's been absolutely critical. And also just the humility to understand how endlessly complex this field is, and saying, listen, I know what I don't know, and I know that I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to, you can't be afraid of looking stupid. You've gotta kind of, get support and just never stop that learning process.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you again, Alli. So, okay, moving back to the topic, storytelling specifically in sales, right? So, first of all, I'd like to ask you why you chose this particular topic. I have a sense, but our viewers might need some elaborating on why you chose this particular topic. So why is storytelling in sales, and specifically in sales, important?
I think it's because we don't necessarily expect it there, right? We expect storytelling to show up in Hollywood. We expect storytelling to show up in the media industry, entertainment.
Right.
You expect Netflix to be talking about storytelling. We don't expect Salesforce to be talking about storytelling. And yet Salesforce, if you analyze what they're doing, they're some of the best storytellers around. Right. And really just realizing Salesforce is a fantastic example of like a very large sales giant that was built on storytelling. For them, everything came down to the no software sign, like that. Right. That's what they were. They started as the story. The software itself isn't, their product isn't that fundamentally different, particularly these days versus a lot of the other CRM products out there. But what they've done is they've told this amazing story about this customer first, and how do we get trailblazers, and how do we empower our trailblazers. And, it's not something that you would, you go to Dreamforce and you're not like, wow, this is a storytelling conference. And yet it actually is. That's exactly what it is, and that's their strategy.
Right. It's just like what HubSpot did. Well, that's the way I see it. Is they created the concept of inbound marketing, and then they built a story around it, and then they kept the story going, and then engaged all of us, including myself. So yeah. So it's yeah. I know what you're talking about. So okay, Alli. Now, going back again to Stick, what role would you say that data and analytics, specifically analytics, play within your business?
Oh, huge. It's huge. So as I mentioned, the way that our product works is, so we take your ideas from text, we generate a visual, and then we understand how you interact with that, so we can make better and better recommendations. And so data analytics that's what powers that recommendation engine. Without it, we would be just shooting in the dark again and again and again without improving the process.
Okay. Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Oops. Okay. Now, just I made a little parenthesis because I'm gonna, folks, and Alli, if I may, I'd like to just simply pause for 1 minute, because I'd like to remind the audience that if you have any questions for Alli, you can do so right here. Let me just activate my favorite, my high-tech device, which is my digital chatbot here. Hold on a second. Let me just push the button. Okay, here it is. Usually Tulio does it, but he's not available, so I'll do it. Okay, here it is. Okay, here it is. If you have any questions for Alli, just send them over right here on Twitter. This is our Twitter handle. Very high tech. So if you folks know how to use Twitter, which I assume you do, just send them your questions right here. We'll read them back to Alli. You should respond right here on the spot. Okay, let me just deactivate it. Boom. Okay, there you go. That's
some data analytics for you. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's a high-tech display. We like to show off every once in a while. All right. Okay, Alli. Well, Listen, we're approaching the final minutes, the final segment of today's talk, and I don't know what happened to Kim. I think that she was delayed for some reason. That's unfortunate because she's a great co-host. Kim, if you're watching or you want to be watching this, I'll scold you when I see you. All right, so let's see. Yeah, we still have about just a few minutes before we wrap up, and I'd like to ask you one more questions. These are from the questions that we assembled right here. Is I think this would be a good question to start the wrap up. If you were an advisor to your own company, looking from the outside, what kind of advice would you give to the leadership team?
This is going to be meta, but I wrote about this on LinkedIn today. There is so much advice floating around. There's so much advice floating around, and my advice to LinkedIn followers today was don't take advice.
Okay.
And I think.
Well, this is going to be on LinkedIn sooner or later, so. Yeah,
exactly. This is a very meta answer, but yeah. I do think there's so much advice floating around the sort of community. There's good advice out there for sure, but for every piece of good advice, there are 9 pieces of really bad advice. And I think that if I were giving advice, it would be, trust your gut a little bit more and, assert your own opinion a little bit more and, realize that when you're building something new, there's no playbook, there's no quote unquote right way to do it. You can learn from others' mistakes, but that's not going to give you the full answer. Part of it is just putting it out there and learning yourself and just moving as quickly as possible.
As quickly as possible. There you have it, folks. Especially in these days of everything's moving faster than the speed of light in technology. So I think that's a good advice. Any final words of wisdom, Alli, for our audience? Would you like to leave our audience something they can keep, something they can remember you by? What would it be?
Keep going. Just keep going. Like find something that when you find kind of that thing that you want to bring to life, whether it's hitting a super high number that you set for yourself or your own startup. I'd say so much of persistence is the most underrated trait. I think it may be the only one that matters. So that would be my message to you. Keep going.
Just keep going and never cease hustling. Okay, so well, folks, this wraps it up. Today we had a conversation with Alli McKee, the CEO and founder of Stick, a communication platform built for B2B sales and success teams. And the only thing left for me, Alli, is just simply send you a big, heartfelt, warm thank you for having been with us today. And it was really an honor and a pleasure. And before you go and before we go off the air, just a quick announcement about next week. We are going to be having a conversation with Angel Jones, the CEO at TrueFable, a DevOps cloud native security company. Well, that's going to be a totally different subject, but still tech related. We don't have the topic yet, folks, so stay tuned on the DojoLIVE website, which is dojo.meetup.com.
Awesome.
And, well, again, Alli, again, thank you so much for having me with us today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And it was an honor as well. So, and for the rest of you who are watching, again, thank you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week in one more episode of DojoLIVE, connecting experts like you. Thank you.
Thank you.